Hi. So I am home right now. And I was not on yesterday because I had to take care of some stuff. Yesterday was a very hard day, and it was a very productive day. Yeah, I'll tell you about it. So I was, I had a car accident last Wednesday, and I had a sales job where I went door to door and gave presentations to people, but you have to have a car. So when he hit my car, I had stopped at a red light. My lawyer says I have to be very careful with what I say. I had stopped at a red light. I was waiting, and I suddenly was hit from behind. The person behind me rear-ended me while I was waiting at a stoplight. Yes, I'm suing, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So I struggle because regarding, I can't talk about it. I want to talk about it, but I can't. So I'm gonna moving on. I am. I have PTSD, and I struggle with depression. Although it's been a really long time since I've struggled with depression, and I'm officially there where today's a day where it's hard to get out of bed. And that's where I'm at. And there's probably like a million people out there right now laying in bed and they can't get out of bed either. And I thought, you know what? I'd feel really good talking to them right now because they understand where I'm at. My phone's going to be shut off tomorrow. I got fired on August. Because my multiple personality was all over the place. So I got fired because of my multiple personality disorder. And I couldn't do the job. I have this phenomenal idea called the Healing Garden, where it's just a respite and a trauma center. But it's not focused on the business. It's not going to be funded by insurance companies. It can't be. It can't be government run and operated. It can't be. In fact, on my staff, it is mandatory that everyone who comes into the Healing Garden on staff has to be friends with me. I have to put them through an evaluation to confirm that they are not corporate corrupt. And only when they are true philanthropists do I let them on board. So that the Healing Garden is a staffing of philanthropists. I can't fund this. We're all broke because we're all philanthropists. Funny, huh? But this has to exist. It has to. There are people right now who are trapped in homes and they can't get out. There are people right now who don't know it, but they're slaves. They don't even know it. I was one of them. There is an entire people in this country who are living as silent slaves. Happy little house elves who don't even know they're enslaved because they love serving so much. They are bred at birth to attract, to be chosen, just so you can serve him. An entire people who have been bred like this for so long that they don't even know they're slaves. That's really what I was escaping from, was my slavery. My father and my mother had conditioned me so perfectly from birth to find a man, marry, be pretty, serve, don't think. Don't think. You know, women aren't supposed to think. You know who else wasn't allowed to think? Slaves. Yeah. I was punished for thinking. How dare you be smarter than a man? My father looked at me and said to me so many times, "You are too smart to be a girl." My best friend punished herself for being smart because you weren't supposed to be. Yentl. Yentl. For those of you who don't know Yiddish or the story or Broadway musicals or Barbra Streisand or Mandy Patinkin, Yentl is a look of life through a woman's point of view in a very conformist society where she wasn't even allowed to learn how to read. Just like a slave, right? So she had to learn in private. Her father taught her. And suddenly she was on the same level as her owners. I had owners too. I couldn't call them boyfriends. I went through years with my therapist on this. I said, what do I call them? I said, they weren't my boyfriends. I can't say I was in a relationship with them because what I had with them wasn't a relationship. No. Took me 42 years. 40 years of living like this. 42 years of life. And it took me 32 years of switching altars while also enduring 27 years of psychology. That's right. While all this was happening to me, I was studying psychology, philosophy, and sociology. That's right. In secret. Because I wasn't allowed books. I can't deny this one now. I was a slave. I didn't get to choose a damn thing in my life. I wasn't allowed. I'm going through depression right now because I just realized my truth. An abuser cannot abuse you if you have your own perspective. Trauma is not a lack of control. That's where psychologists have it wrong. Trauma is not an inability to cope. No. Trauma is when your current perspective is altered I gotta say this right. Give me a minute. Trauma is when your ultimate truth is altered, taken, suppressed, shoved, removed. Trauma is the amputation and or malformation of your truth. So that when you have a friend who touches you and says, this isn't sexual, when it very much is. And in my brain, I have a truth that I can trust my judgment. This is a very intimate relationship between you and yourself. And then somebody comes along and contradicts your truth, your perspective. And they take your perspective and they start to warp it into their own. Narcissism is really good at this. A sex abuser will take your truth with all of your definitions of what you think is sex abuse, and they will twist it so that you will develop a perception that is blind to what they are really doing to you. But your truth is still there, and it knows it. And that truth screams and fights against what's happening to you. It's saying, I'm going off, I'm the truth radar, I'm communicating with every bit of your body that you are being manipulated and controlled. It's there. That's the core of abuse. That is the core of trauma. That is the core of pain. When what we know or what we think we know is interfered, manipulated, warped, changed because of something out there. I was born into slavery. I remember being told how beautiful I was at 2 years old and that I would make a great wife. By the time I was 5, I was pretending to be married and playing with dolls to condition me that this is where I needed to be. In fact, we're going to associate your psychological makeup as a 2-year-old and your formative development, we're going to tie it into dolls and babies. So that when you have a baby of your own, you're going to feel that nostalgia of, oh, I remember when I was a kid, this is what I was meant for. Yeah, that's right. So by the time I was 8, I was crying to my mom about wanting to have children of my own. Yeah. So that when I was 12, I was jealous of a friend of mine who also was 12 and had her son. Yeah. And I watched my mother pick up plates of food and rush them to my father. Made sure he was served at all times, just like Dobie. Just like Dobie. I watched her so happy to fluff his pillow and fetch his shoes and dress him and serve him and feed him and make sure that only he gets what he wants and that She never makes food that he doesn't like. She does it to this day, just like Dobie. And if she's late, and if it's wrong. My first owner threatened rape. My second owner did. Every time I disobeyed, I was raped. He would dress me up in whatever he wanted, take me shopping, and dress me up like a little doll. I was 15. And if I had any opinion, any objection, he would rape me. My first owner trained me so well that by the time the second owner got to me, I couldn't. Oh, I was done for. He raped me on 9/11. That's how I ended up raped. I was with my owner. And he made me listen to the tower fall while he raped me. It was a perfect trauma bonding scenario. And he knew it. He was trying to trauma bond me to him. And instead, he trauma bonded me to New York City. So while all of you endured 9/11, I listened to it and was raped. I cannot begin to tell you how dysfunctional this makes me every September. So that I can't have a job in the fall. I was fired in August. So, this is my truth. This is my truth. This is what I've been avoiding to say for a very long time. I come from a very bad place where women are conditioned at birth to obey. And if you don't, you are beaten or raped. My third owner lined up my children and would torture each one of them down the line in a row so that the first two got to see what happens to the first one. And if I didn't obey, my children suffered. He wasn't. That was my husband. So this, I guess, is a wake-up call to women saying, do you know you're Dobie? You do know that you're a house elf, right? You know you're a house elf, right? Think about it. because I was. And I got out and I got to see my perspective shift from happy little house elf to feminist. And I now feel like I'm Hermione, running around. Thank you, Rowling, so much for writing those books so I could have this analogy. J.K. Rowling, thank you. Thank you very much for giving me those books so I can make this analogy. Ladies, I feel like Hermione running around with spew badges, going, girlfriend, do you know what slavery is? Just because we're not black doesn't mean it's not happening to us. The only difference is we don't even know we're slaves. Some of us are beaten. Some of us are flogged. Some of us are strangled, and some of us are killed, and we don't even make it out alive. Some women have their children killed in front of them. Some are too fucking terrified to take the first step. So I feel like Hermione running around going, ladies, we're house elves. We're not free. We're slaves. And we've been conditioned so well to serve men that we don't even know we're slaves anymore. So that's what I see. I got out 2 years ago. Now you're caught up to my story. Now you're on the same page as me. Now I can tell you my story. I escaped from my slavery in 2020. And the very first place I wanted to go was New York City. Because I had freedom for the first time, and that's the first thing that came to my mind. It was my very first memory. I was 2 years old, and I was inside the Statue of Liberty, looking out, crying because I wanted to go up to the torch, and they told me no. The story goes, according to my family, because I don't remember the rest of the story, that I then screamed the entire way back upstate in protest that I was leaving New York City. I remember talking about nothing but New York until I was 12 years old. I mean, obsessed. Like, at 8 years old, I ran away to New York City. I made it 5 miles in January. But I got here at 12. And my family had to go to the JFK. So they went to JFK. And they went to JFK and they, oh, this feels so good. I got to see the city. I got to see everything. I got to see it all. It was so beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. So I absolutely made the decision that I was going to live there, that I was home. When I was 15 years old, I met an owner who used that to blackmail me. Wow, it's really a lot easier to talk about this with the right words. A lot easier. My owner knew that I loved New York City. And so he would blackmail, extort, you name it, anything, with the promise that I would be in New York. And he made sure I understood that there was absolutely no way I could have the city without him. And I believed him. 20 years after I freed myself. That's how long it took for me to realize that it wasn't true. 20 years. In 2001, he raped me on 9/11, and that was, I trauma bonded to New York City. Of all the people, the irony, of all the people, I had to listen to my city being attacked and my people dying while I was being raped. This city is in my blood. The city is my home. So in 2020, when I was free, I got my very first taste of freedom. I went to New York City. I thought to myself, I'm gonna have to get back here every month. Nope, didn't even make it that far. 5 days later, I had this pain in me to get back to her. It was Thursday. I had the luxury of manipulating my schedule to make whatever time I wanted. God, this feels so good. Finally saying it. And I just need a minute. I'm sorry. I was home. It was the very first bit of freedom that I had. It was the only light of freedom inside my enslavement that I could see was I love New York City. That's my truth. Angela loves New York City. That is my truth. And that was the one truth that they could not take away from me, was that I had to get to her. It's like every part of my subconscious woke up and started screaming, if you get to New York, you get away from them, and then you can see. So I did. That's what I did. I fought every step of the way. I was 8 running away. I ran away again when I was 16. I found somebody who could get me to New York, and I was there. But it wasn't good enough. I see it now. I see it all now. So in 2020, I ran to New York, and every 5 days, I couldn't be gone more than 5 days. So I scheduled my work so that I would have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then come back on Sunday. That's what I was really doing. I couldn't stay away. And I started to develop this thing where when I went into the city, it would be a high, and I would stay on this high, and then I would get back home, and I would be depressed, and more depressed, and more depressed. And then I would get closer, and I would be like, yes, let's go to New York. And I was happy again, and I was home, and I was crying by the time Saturday came. I did this for a year. I met someone. I was backpacking through New York City for a year. I would get here, park my car in the Bronx, Manhattan. I would then grab a backpack, just a backpack. And I backpacked through Manhattan for a year. I slept with over 60 men. I learned New York. I learned what I could do. I was empowered. And then I walked away from it, and I fell in love with him really hard. I am still in love with him. I was a mess when he found me. I had been through 40 years of slavery. I had been raped for 6 years in my sleep. I'd been a sex slave, literally, chains and all, for 6 months. My second owner did that to me. I had been bled, beaten, blackmailed, extorted, enslaved, pissed on. I consented to all of it because I was terrified of saying no. In fact, the only time I actually said no, really solid, strong, was on 9/11 when he said, "Let's go." And I said, "Excuse you? They're dying." And he grabbed my arm. I said no, and he pushed me on the bed. So when I was 15, I realized that the one thing all of my owners had in common was education. None of them were educated. Not one. So I thought, what if I studied philosophy and psychology? I was convinced that by knowing, through knowledge, I could get out. So I started sneaking books in secret. And I started educating myself. It was terrifying. I was terrified that someone was going to find me with my books. And I knew that if I had studied philosophy and psychology enough, I could figure something out. I studied math, Roman history. I was 15, 16, 17, 18, writing theses on Rome. I was reading the great books. I read them all. No, I did not read them all. I was halfway through the list. I have to think about that. I can't remember. But I was working my way through the great list. And I came to Frankenstein. And I didn't see it as a man wanting to play God. I didn't see it as a man wanting to be scientists and challenge God. Oh no. I saw it as a man who could not cope with death. I saw it as a man who did not know how to handle his grief. The book for me was about accepting your grief. But instead, the story had been turned around to say, oh, don't challenge the narcissist. Don't challenge the God. God is a narcissist, by the way. God is a narcissist. So, when I was 21 years old, I was able to out-argue a lawyer who was 30 years older than me. It was psychological entrapment. That's what the owners use to control. It's almost impossible to get out, but I found out how, through philosophy. I studied perspective and truth and ethics. And I was able to see a line of philosophy that gave me the strength, the tools, and the knowledge to argue myself out of psychological entrapment. That is how I did it. I used dialectical behavioral therapy to override my own psychological entrapment while enslaved. Because when he trauma bonded me to New York City, he actually trauma bonded me to my truth. That's how I was able to get out. I finally prioritized my truth above his. And this is the story of how I did that and what came about as a result. I couldn't tell my story before because I didn't know it. I've got 5 beautiful people in my head all screaming, tell your story, Anna. Tell your story. So I'm going to stop at 45 minutes and I'm just going to keep going live and telling my story. Why not? Because this is what I'm supposed to do right now. I can talk to the universe. The universe has been yelling at me for quite a while, and I listen to her most of the time. Okay, she says none of the time, which is why I had a car accident, to make sure I got grounded and depressed, and I would spend it in my tent realizing I just need to go on YouTube and tell my story. I'm very stubborn, but the universe is right. It is time that I sit down and finally tell you who I am and where I'm from. So while I was fucking around Manhattan, I had this one thing that I would say over and over again, without fail. I loved it. And it was, where are you from? And I always answered, everywhere and nowhere. Everywhere and nowhere. I loved it. Because I wanted to be everywhere. I wanted to go so many places that when I was done, I could say I have literally been everywhere. But really, I'm from nowhere. Nowhere I want to talk about. Nowhere I ever want to be again. So I am from everywhere and nowhere. That is my hometown. And now I'm going to tell you the story of Anna. The best thing about the story of Anna, I finally know the title, The Story of Anna. All right, I will tell you the story of Anna. Consider this is going to be an audiobook in reverse. I give you audiobooks in reverse. I haven't actually written this yet. I decided to do the audiobook first. So here's what's going to happen. This is not chapter 1. This is the prelude, the prologue. This is the prologue. So that's what I'm going to call it, the prologue. And the next one is going to be chapter 1, the story of Anna, audiobook version. My website is www.annashealinggarden.com. No, .org, because I'm a philanthropist who gives a shit. A big, big shit. Now, my website is www.annashealinggarden.org. You can find me on Facebook at Fuck Trauma Fight. And I also have Meditation for Beginners, which is available also on Facebook. I run the Devil's Dungeon, a backdoor to the garden where I get downright dirty when it comes to building confidence. And I also write books for a living.
AngelaBChrysler.com is my website, but it's inaccessible right now. But you can get my books online at Amazon.com. Just Google Angela B, like Beth, because that's my middle name. Chrysler, like the car. Exactly like the car. I prefer Anna Imagination. My God. I will see you next time on Anna's Story.